Hello, we've got Barb Pastusco from Best of Barb Wellness with me, as well as Beverly Pollock from Betterment with Beverly on her handle. So we are going to continue our conversation about our stress part one and how worry, overwhelm, similar emotions kind of carry or escalate into that stress state, right?
Absolutely,
So
yes.
let me start with you, Barb. What would you say are some indicators? Those that when you're feeling, oh wow, something's going to go on. Where do you go from there? Like what? How would you identify it?
Well, firstly, for me personally, I start feeling it in my body. So the one thing I will notice, and I think people will notice it on me as well, is the furrowed brow, right? You have that furrowed brow. So that is the first indicator in my mind. The second or just the consecutive indicators are just how my body is feeling. There could be tension, of course. Tension in the traps is where I get it,
Mm,
right up in the shoulders and neck. You could begin to get a little bit headachy because you're so worried and you're just tense. So
mm,
that's, for me, that is the biggest indicator. I mean, I can go on and say upset stomach because everything leads to the gut. If
mhm.
you're worried, it's going to affect the gut, which will affect the digestion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we can go
Yeah.
on and on. But those, to me, those are my first indicators. And I'm
Yes.
sure there's others that can relate to that.
One and to summarize that, it's a physiology.
Yes.
You notice it in your body. That's our physiology. How about
That's the first thing. Yeah.
yeah? How about Beverly? What would you say? Like so Barb's covered the body. What about in the mind? Do you if you can kind of go into there?
Yeah, and Queen of Warriors. I think I had the reigning Queen of Warriors.
I'm
Hey,
not
we're
that far
talking about
behind you, Beth.
Honestly, sometimes I think I never had children of my own because goodness gracious, they wouldn't have got, I would have been so worried over every little thing. And so for me, it's that obsession in my mind where all other thoughts are blocked out. And and when I'm really stuck in a worry, I almost become unconscious about the fact that I'm worrying. I don't know if this makes any sense to y'all or not, but I'm so what's the word? It starts with a P.
preoccupied.
Preoccupied, yeah, but there's anyway. I'm so obsessed with this worry that it almost blocks out all other thoughts and the consciousness, right, of where I'm at in my body so that I can take some steps to get out of it. And then somehow at some point in it, it goes, oh, you're worried about this. Okay, now what can I do? But until it gets to that point, I'm in that mind body because they become, then my mind is driving my body and all the things that Barb talked about, my shoulders up to here, upper body aches and pains. But it overtakes my mind.
Mm,
And I think that's fascinating how one little thought of a something maybe, right? And if you're obsessing about, oh, I've got the winning lottery ticket, I'm going to win that, right? It's such a heightened, experience of thinking, yeah, yeah, yeah. But if you're thinking, oh, it's usually a doom and gloom worry that
mhm,
brings it to that.
mhm. Well, and I was mentioning to Barb earlier that I frame worry is something about the future.
Yeah.
We're planning ahead. We're worrying about what may happen ahead of us. And as Deepak Chopra likes to say, 95% of what we worry about in the future doesn't even end up happening.
Yeah.
And, so it really comes down to what is the meaning we're placing on that future event that we could be stirring up that pot, as Barb had mentioned, with that gut reaction, because that's technically our third brain, if you want to kind of look at it metaphysically, physically. But so if there's a meaning that we're attaching, does anybody want to kind of talk about that? Like as a
Um,
coach, when we've got a client in front of us who's worried all the time, or feeling overwhelmed, what do you think that the meaning that they're attaching to their thoughts that are creating their feelings, that are creating their behaviors of worry, is stemming from?
yeah, I think sometimes it goes back to even a belief system, as far back as when they were young and watching adults worrying about certain things, and then having that correlation or that connection, that trigger per se, in their mind that, oh, if this happens, I have to start worrying because it's going to perpetuate.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's really, really important to figure out what your trigger can be
Mhm.
as you start to notice, or and even notice when you start to worry. Okay, what, not necessarily what is it that I'm worrying about, but what triggered that worry that
Mhm.
is making me have all of these emotions, the physical reaction to it. I think that's the first step, I believe,
I
at
agree.
least for me.
Mhm. How about you, Beverly?
Yeah, and I think there's often themes to people's worries, right? They're often on the same thing. It's often related to safety, underlying concerns about safety for
Yes.
yourself or for another, or there's those physical worries, right? I've got this lump, therefore I have this, or financial worries, right? And so I find it interesting that people often have a theme to their worries. And for me, I certainly do. It's often around safety, my physical safety or safety of others. And um, uh, and I think most people, when they go through, and then you can make that connection, right? If this worry is about this thing, but it's similar to all the other worries that I've been experiencing. And for me, it's sort of like Barb said, talking that through and trying to identify, what the root cause is of the root source for that is.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
just want to add
Yeah.
something in there, that just popped up in my mind, is that I think sometimes people make up a story or make up something that they can worry about because worrying keeps them in that comfort zone,
Yeah. I
and
want to
it
bring that
it
too.
gives them that safety. Well, if I'm worrying about this, then it either must be so or it may be so,
Mhm.
and that just makes them feel a little bit better, like saying to themselves, like, I'm going to be proactive here because what I'm worrying about, I will be prepared for that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And they put themselves, their mind, their bodies through all of that potentially for no reason.
Very good point, Barb.
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. And getting incorporating what Beverly was saying. So as human beings, we have human needs, basic human needs. Safety, certainty is one of them, but also significance is another one. And so, as you were saying, Barb, the perpetual worrier, that gives them significance because they're prepared for
Mhm.
what may have you, disaster that could come into their lives. And with the origin of the worry, if that's the way that they've lived, since a young child, they were told that they were a worrier. Oh, my daughter, she's always worrying about things. There's an origin there, and it's a programming. And I think that's what we're kind of wrapping around to is how are you conditioned as a child to bring that worry forward into your daily life? So, I have a family member who is a perpetual worrier, like you mentioned, Barb. And I keep saying to her, it's like, are you sure this is going to happen? She goes, well, I'm prepared if it does. And she goes, I'm a worrier, but she's put that as an identity. So back to your belief systems,
Yes.
Barb,
Yeah.
right? Belief systems are part of our identity. So
Exactly.
let's talk about what is for clarifying for people, what are beliefs? What does that look like? How does that sound so people can be more aware of listening? Beverly?
Well, I was just going to say Barb is such an expert on the beliefs. So Barb, can I defer to you because you really do such a lovely job of explaining that when I've read the posts you have on your Facebook and Instagram. You do a remarkable job of articulating that.
Well, a belief is just something that we deem to be true. So for example, a belief, and this is just a very mild example. It is sunny outside. That's, a belief. I am a woman. That is a true belief. It's something that is
fact.
true. A fact. It's a belief. So that it's just something that we in our gut that are so certain about that we believe is true about anything. So that is what a belief is.
And then that makes it an identity because people attach that belief to their identity. That's where the I ams are, or I can't, or I'm not, that's an identity. So when you say I am a woman, that is a fact. But some people say I'm an old woman, or I'm a fat woman, or whatever. Those are limiting
beliefs.
Yes. Yeah. And I did want to share on that.
Yeah.
So,
And those are the stories that we tell ourselves. The limiting beliefs are the stories that we tell ourselves so that we can continue the way we are and have that sense of security. But it also stops us from really truly being who we want to be or have what we want to have
being
when
authentic.
we stay stuck in those limiting beliefs.
Well, how about we talk about what a coach does on this topic, because this is pretty much the basis of coaching, is helping people recognize their belief systems. I'm very much involved in Tony Robbins' world, and he calls it the triad. So you have your physiology, you got your language, and your meaning, and what you focus on. So, who would like to share on that? Stories. We're talking about the stories.
Okay. I was thinking I'm not a Tony Robbins expert, so that language is
No, just the triad I was explaining. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, we live on our stories, and then our stories project our future. So just a simple example, this morning I was, I do those Wordle games in the morning on the phone, and I share them. My niece and I do them, and we share our scores back and forth. And she said, oh, I'm not going to get it today. And sure enough, she muffed the next one, right? Because that was her story. And so that's a very simple, breaking it down, but that's what we do, right? I'm not good at basketball, so I can't go out there. I'm not good at sports. And so then you truly are limiting, as Barb said, you're limiting your abilities, but that's something that you've made up. I had a, injury in my ankle when I was a child. I had a nasty infection in my bone and was in a cast for a year. So it was always, oh, that's your weak ankle. My mom always kept saying, careful of your foot, Beverly, careful, you can't do that. And so it came up that I was, not someone who had the stamina and the staying power of other people, because I had a weak foot within that. And it just truly, I, probably still have to really consciously think that through to go, actually, no, my ankle's pretty strong now.
That is a classic example of a limiting belief that was, you know, tacked on programmed in our mind from early childhood that has lasted for so many years.
Yeah, perpetuated and
Yeah.
prevented you perhaps from doing some of those sports and enjoying that stuff as, as a high schooler or trying out for games, or whatnot.
Yeah.
It's, I like to kind of call it a self-fulfilling prophecy, because you're right.
Yeah.
Right. That's the other thing that human beings like to be, is right. And so
Yeah.
if we're, I'm not able to do this because excuse, fill in the blank, we all have them,
Yes.
that you're going to be right, because that will appear more and more in our lives, right? Barb, you talk about this on your Facebook and Instagram.
I do, and that kind of builds into our topic today of worry and anxiety, because if we have these beliefs, then we constantly worry about them, and then on the extreme side, we have the anxiety that's built into it, be personal anxiety, social anxiety. Just it's not just how we feel or what we look like. Then it becomes paralyzing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got the whole topic of when you don't know how to treat your anxiety in a positive way, then that's when people turn to medication.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a whole other topic for another occasion.
Yes.
Is how we turn to artificial fixes,
Mm-hmm.
thinking that is going to solve all the problems, and that this tiny little pill is going to take my anxiety away.
There's no easy button.
And yes, it may, but the underlying reasons for that anxiety or that worry is still there.
Yeah, treating the symptoms versus the cause, right?
Exactly.
So let's talk about how coaching can help somebody overcome their worry or anxiety or stress. Since we're here, we got 3 coaches. How would you start with that? Beverly or Barb? Who would like to start?
Yeah. So what I tend to do with people, because really stress, stress, anxiety, worry are all captured up into one, right? And so often it comes, clients will come with one thing, but you see what's underneath that when you start working through it. And
Yes.
I'm a big believer. For me, it works so well. I have to talk it through. And then when I hear myself say it out loud, then it rings a bell, because somebody else can say to me, Beverly, you're worrying for nothing, or you're anxious about nothing. It means nothing, right? I have to come to that myself.
Mm-hmm.
I find when I'm with clients, it's just continuing to just ask questions, reflect back on something they may have said earlier to bring that through. And then it's like, oh, they can see how those dots are connected. And it really is amazing, especially with young, a lot of the women I work with are moms of young kids, and they're trying to balance a crazy career and run a household, and often have aging parents at the same time. And so lots of things fueling their worries and concerns, right? It's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so even just naming it is tremendous, right? If you can get to the point where they can name what it is that they're concerned about, then you can start working through that and having some recognition. Okay, that's what it is. So in future they can see what, make that comparison. And then it often just takes the tiniest little thing, like the teeniest little step, to get yourself off that hamster wheel.
It's a new perspective that you're offering.
Yes.
Yeah.
Beautifully said. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the only thing that I would, just add to that, because I don't think there's much more that can be added to that, is what I like to do is teach my clients to recognize the trigger of the worry,
Mhm.
And even just writing down, okay, this is what I'm worried about. Why am I worried about it? What will happen? Like you said, Bev, asking these questions, but writing it down so they actually physically see what it is they're worried about. And I firmly believe that once it's written down, it's not as scary,
Mhm.
because then the intelligence side comes in, reads this, and may say, well, that's not really a big worry.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
if this and this and this can be done to stave off that worry. And I think that is such a key thing.
Mhm.
And I find that's quite a helpful tool.
I do too. I believe that journaling is, something I have all my clients do. Get it out of your head, put it down. And as you said, when you see it, then you can kind of analyze and go, is this really going to happen? Like, or
Yeah.
perhaps if I do X, Y, and Z, this will never happen. So I'm prepared. So
Yeah.
I think that worry comes from unpreparedness, or
Mhm.
again, making something bigger than what it may end up being in the future. But what about some self-care techniques that somebody could do
Um,
in that regard?
Jade, before we jump onto that, can I ask you a question?
Mhm.
When you're working with clients and when you're in that worry state, you're often very heightened, right?
Mhm.
And when
Yeah.
you're in that heightened, right up here, ramped up to, you're going 100 miles an hour in your head, chances are it's hard to have any other thoughts come in. So it's been my experience that I like to try to have people come down from that, get back down into
Mhm.
their bodies.
Yep.
So what kinds of things do you do to help people come from up there to settle down so that then
Mhm.
you can begin a different dialogue?
Well, when I
Yes.
notice when working with clients and during a session, if I'm seeing that they're, worried up to the wazoo and they're like, oh, I really need to talk to you, I get them to move. Movement is the first thing, because when we can change our physiology, if they're sitting down, on the Zoom talking, I'll get them to
Mhm.
stand up and even just walk around their chair, because then it takes them out of state, out of the worry state. And usually, when getting back to when we were talking about physiology, where you're feeling it, if you can shift their body through a movement, have them breathe differently, because again,
Yes.
using our parasympathetic breathing, bringing us into a good state of relaxation, that is
Yeah.
always, my first go-tos. Let's move so that, you're not in that kind of like worried state, looking down, kind of, we know what it feels like to worry, right? We know what our body's doing. We know, if we're doing this. And if we can open up, we can shake the worry for the moment. And it's the action, in my opinion, that can stave off that worry. How about you, Barb?
I completely agree with that there. When you distract someone by changing their thought pattern
Hmm.
from that intense worry, because they're so focused when they come to you, they're so prepared and so hyped up to tell you about what's happening and what they're worried about, that they've worked themselves up into this state. So if you come in with something completely different, and that's why I like to start off by asking the questions on what is going well,
Yep.
because then it's like, oh, wait a second.
I want to talk about my shit.
Yeah, yeah. And it's everybody's always so prepared to talk about everything bad that's happening and that they're experiencing in their lives, and they forget of all the good things. And I even say it doesn't matter what it is. It could be something small. You could have had um someone smile at you, like, who never normally smiles at you, or you could have someone say thank you that
Mhm.
never, it's that's a good thing,
Celebrate it.
you know any little thing. And that thought, that trigger of that shift of that thought pattern, takes them off their worry, even if it's just for I don't know, 5 minutes, if you're having a 5-minute conversation in the beginning, it takes them away from that. It
Mhm.
breaks that pattern. And then you can now start, they're more open to starting a conversation, a less stressed conversation. You've talked them down at least the top ledge onto the, the next, one or two below.
Yeah.
And then you can have a not highly intense emotional conversation. You have more of an intelligent conversation where their brain is now thinking about, is this worry really, really a
Real.
worry, a concern, real? How real is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's excellent advice. How about you, Beverly? Since you
Yeah.
asked the question, it's coming back at you.
Well, it's
That's right.
interesting because sometimes people do get on that tirade, right? Of, oh, this happened and I had this work project and then I had to pick the kid. Like it can just get going on that. And if it's someone that you've worked with for, over a number of weeks, what you can do is, just sort of pause the conversation for a moment and reflect back. Oh, 3 months ago, how would you have handled that situation? I just want you to be aware of what you have done, right? And that kind of goes, because they're shocked. I get shocked when I'm working with somebody and when I'm the client and somebody points out to me the progress, either the progress I've made or how I've reacted a little differently in this situation. It's kind of like a little wake up call. Oh, and that's very affirming when you
Mhm.
can point out to somebody how they have actually been doing that in a different way and they just haven't even thought of it in that way.
Oh, and to summarize that, to say what Barb had with the celebrations, it's putting them in a grateful state.
Yeah.
Because when you're grateful for all of those little things, the small wins, those things that you can celebrate, I had a date with my husband last week, whatever, those are moments of gratitude. And when you're grateful,
Yeah.
you're not worrying. You're grateful to be
Absolutely.
alive. You're grateful to have your feet hit the ground when you wake up in the morning.
You
Really.
can't do the two things at once, right?
No, you can't.
Right.
And so back to the journaling with all the worries, what
Mhm.
are you grateful for?
Yeah.
I do like to point that out to my clients. And just to
Flip
kind
that
of,
switch. Yeah.
yeah, and to wrap this up into a bow, let's put some self-care little things that we can give to our listeners today, just because we are self-care coaches and in the a light way of saying it, but there are self-care
Mhm.
practices. How about you give
Yeah.
me, we'll each give one. Barb.
Well, for me, I, it goes back to the movement and not necessarily a workout. I I love it's kind of a double whammy. I love going out for walks, and then I put some music on, and my favorite music. I love to dance. So on my walks, there are times where I will actually skip, like when I'm walking around the pond. It's mostly, the pond in the center and there's houses around, but it's all people's backyards. And if I'm walking in the morning, I mean, most people are at work, or, if someone's watching me skipping, that's okay too. But it's just the joy that I get from listening to the music, and I'm singing at the top of my lungs. I mean, I've been dog sitting for the past couple of weeks, and I'm taking this dog on a walk, and sometimes she kind of looks at me like, hey lady, have you gone crazy? And I'm just singing at the top of my lungs and skipping, and she's like, okay, well, we're going to be moving faster. But anyways, those are the two things. I love to dance. I love, some music that inspires me. So the movement, and then just being outside in the fresh air and everything, that helps to bring me down and just
Yeah.
helps me to refocus.
center and ground. And those are excellent self-care practices. How about you, Beverly?
For me, it's all about connection because really worrying and anxiety is a solo sport, right? And having some connection. So, and oftentimes people will isolate when they're in a deep period of worrying and they think they're the only ones. That's very human to have those thoughts, I think, and those feelings. So it's making sure you have, at least once a day, a real connection with another caring, non-judgmental individual. And to me, that's critical for survival.
Important. Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful to have both of you. Just a little FYI. Another practice, we did talk about journaling. With that could be meditation, and it doesn't have to be longer than 5 minutes. It's just grounding, right? It's like letting go. Let's just let this go, because we can't always, change the future, but we can make our decision in this moment. We can choose. Are we going to, go down that rabbit hole of worry? Or are we going to let things go? What happens, happens. And having faith that, we're prepared, or the future will turn out, and that kind of stuff. So, I'm kind of going into that meditative self-care practice, because that also incorporates breathing. And we can bring oxygen into our system. We know how that can make such a difference.
And then just on that note, because everything that we have all said has been so true and so powerful, and just on that note, to say that we can't control what's happening around us, but we can control how we react to it and what we're going to do about it. And that in itself will change the whole thought process. Work on the things that you can control, and what you can't, oh well.
Yep, that's right. That's exactly right. Because it is a choice, Barb. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah. Well, thank you for your time. And once again, we're going to get together within the next couple of weeks. I think, Beverly, you're off for holidays, so that's awesome. So excited for you. And thank you for joining me, and hopefully we'll see some people on our social media channels or whatnot to carry this conversation forward.
Absolutely. Thank you, ladies. Again, it's always a pleasure.
Yeah.
For the connection, friends.
Thank you. Bye-bye.